Hey, what's up, people? It's Coco Loco here. Today I'm going to introduce to you guys my most recent successful Wi-Fi UU team. But first, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about what this team has accomplished. First of all, it went undefeated so far in the Pokemon Online Champions League, which means I have a grand total of 2 wins, which is pretty goddamn impressive, if I must say so myself. And secondly, and a bit more seriously, it has a pretty good win-loss ratio on the ladder at about 12 to 1. And to be frank, almost every loss that I've had has been to complete and utter bullshit hacks like last turn crits. So now, I'm going to start telling you guys about the team. I started wanting to make this team with Crobat because I think it's one of the best, if not the best, Pokemon in UU right now. Being able to check and even counter things like Shaman, Virizion, Venusaur, Roserade, if it ever comes back to UU, Yanmega, Heracross, and more importantly, it really cockblocks Stall. Completely and utterly cockblocks Stall. How does it do that, you might ask? Well, it's pretty simple. A combination of Roost and Taunt on almost any Pokemon is usually going to give Stall teams a very hard time because they don't use that many offensive moves, and the ones they do use are usually very weak. So when you have decent bulk, like Crobat does, it's going to be very hard for them to break said Pokemon. The third move I'm going to use on Crobat is obviously the obligatory stab move, which is the only good stab move that Crobat has, which is Brave Bird. Despite the recoil damage, Crobat still maintains its very good bulk because when invested, it actually has pretty high HP, and with the combination of the HP and leftovers, the recoil from Brave Bird isn't such a big deal. The last move Crobat should have is a toss-up between U-Turn and Toxic. Both of them have their pros and cons. U-Turn is very good when you're switching into Leech Seed, because then you can just U-turn out after maybe taunting or roosting, and the Leech Seed will be gone. But Toxic hits things that really walls this guy completely and cripples him for the rest of the game, things like Slowbro, for example. So due to the nature of the rest of the team, I decided to go with Toxic on this specific instance. So as I told you guys before, this Crobat usually uses leftovers, but I've seen some people use Flight Gem and Acrobatics in Brave Bird's spot. But I really don't recommend that because unless you're attacking constantly, Brave Bird and the leftover recovery is actually going to give you more health in the long run. So then you move on to the EVs, and like any good bulky Pokemon, you should probably max out HP. And while I'm usually not an advocate of using absolute max HP on stuff because it tends to increase residual damage, in this specific instance it doesn't, because if you look at 374, which is the HP stat that you reach with maximum investment, it isn't divisible by 4, which means that every time you switch into Stealth Rock, you're not actually taking that extra damage, unlike, say, Arcanine. So now, we're going to use the rest of the EVs to make this Crobat a little bit more, adept to doing its job. I'm going to give it 176 Speed EVs and a Jolly Nature, because with that, it outspeeds Sceptile and Alakazam. You're almost a perfect counter to Sceptile because the only thing that can actually hurt you that Sceptile commonly runs is Specs Hidden Power Ice. And to be honest, Sceptile isn't spamming Hidden Power Ice all the time. You're also a very good Revenge Killer to things like Alakazam and Scarf Abomasnow. And you're also outspeeding things like Virizion, Raikou, and Durant. So yeah, it's pretty good. We're then going to give it a little bit of investment in each defense. Specifically, we're going to give it 200 and 201. These amounts don't actually let you survive any specific hits, but I usually like to have at least 200 on each defense for my defensive Pokemon, because that gives them a good amount of overall bulk. If you see here, I gave it 1 extra special defensive point, and that's for one reason and one reason only. That's because I do not want to give Scarf Porygon Z a download boost when it comes into Revenge Crobat. The rest of the EVs I'm just going to dump into attack to let Brave Bird do a little bit more damage, but you can really feel free to put them anywhere, as long as you're not putting them in speed, because you really do not need more than 176 speed. We're also going to make this Crobat female, because female bats are cuter. The second Pokemon I added to this team was actually one that I worried was pretty much cock blocking it, and that is Shaymin. But not any Shaymin, because Life Orb Shaymin has always been pretty popular in UU. But the Shaymin that I wanted to use was actually a Sub Leech Seed set. I saw Vaporeon using it on the server, and I realized it was pretty good as soon as Roserade was test banned. But after using it for a while, people started catching on that Venusaur was incredibly good in the new UU. So Subseed Shaymin became a lot less useful. So guess what? I ended up going back to the common variant of Shaymin, which uses Life Orb to increase its power output. It uses Seed Flare as its choice of stab move, which is pretty goddamn good with that 40% special defense drop rate. For coverage, I actually give the Shaymin Hidden Power Ice, but watch closely as I magically make it so that Hidden Power Ice does not drop my Speed IVs. A lot of people need to learn that Hidden Power Ice does not require a 30 Speed IV. The third move it uses is not Substitute. It's actually Rest, because as many of you know, a Natural Cure plus Rest means that you can heal your Shaymin up instantly and switch out and come back in at full health with no repercussions whatsoever. And lastly, we're going to give it Earth Power to hit those Steel types and Fire types that like to switch into Shaymin's stab moves. As for EVs, we're going to go with the really common spread of 252 speed, 252 special attack, and Porygon Z not received a boost, but as you can see, I lowered my IV in defense for the Hidden Power Ice, so that's not necessary. We're also going to give this a Timid Nature attacker. We're going to lower its attack IVs to 0. Actually, we're going to lower them to 2 so that whenever you face some troll guy on the ladder using Confuse Ray, you're pretty goddamn unlucky. Now, the next Pokemon I used was Snorlax, but not any Snorlax. I specifically wanted to use an offensive Snorlax, which I got the idea from laddering a little bit on the new Smogon UU, which has Chandelure. We're obviously going to switch the ability to Thick Fat, because immunity is pretty useless, because every Snorlax should be running Rest. And if you're not, you're probably running some kind of Wish support, but there aren't really a lot of Wish Pokemon that have good defensive synergy with Snorlax, and hence Thick Fat with Rest is better. As an offensive Snorlax, we're obviously going to use an Adamant Nature. And I'm going to give this guy Leftovers, because even though it's offensive, it's still using Rest. So, yeah. Rest without Sleep Talk is shit, so let's give it Sleep Talk. As for its other moves, I'm going to use Stab Frustration with the amount of attack that I'm going to invest in this guy, Frustration does huge amounts of damage. People do not realize how strong Snorlax is without the need to use Curse. And for coverage, we're going to use Crunch, because basically this guy is supposed to counter things such as Mismagius and Alakazam. So you need to hit them hard. As for EVs, we're going to give this guy 216 attack, which is enough to hit that last stat jump point. As you can see, if I lower the IVs by 4, the stat becomes 3. It jumps up 2 points. We're going to give this guy 4 EVs in speed, because you really want to outspeed those common variants of Whirlwind Snorlax, because you're hitting them with a stab frustration for an average of 42% damage. The recovery he gets from leftovers. And we're going to dump the rest in defense, just so we can take things like Psyshock a little bit better. And basically what this guy does for the team is just tank almost every special move you can think of and hit back extremely hard. When people see Rest on a Snorlax, they immediately assume that it's the common Whirlwind Snorlax, which I honestly think it's a really crappy set. It doesn't accomplish anything other than sit there, and is actually pretty big setup fodder while it's sleeping, because it only has a 33% chance of picking Whirlwind on any given turn, of course. We're going to make this guy female because Pokemon Nerd is gay. So now, the next Pokemon I added was something that you guys have seen me use in UU a lot before, and that is Slowbro. And the reason I picked Slowbro is because it has amazing defensive synergy with Snorlax, resisting fighting moves and also being able to counter Psyshock Alakazam. Well, not counter, but it makes a pretty good check to Psyshock Alakazam, which actually beats Snorlax. We're going to give this guy leftovers because, as any wall should, it's going to be running leftovers. A stab move in the game, but I gotta say it's pretty goddamn good on a bulky water. Psyshock, so that we can hit things like Virizion on the Switch. We're also hitting Heracross harder than we would with Psychic. And other than that, it's just generally good to be able to hit from both sides of the spectrum. So Psyshock is usually superior to Psychic. Next, we're going to give this guy Slack Off, because any good physical wall appreciates it. This is mainly because this team likes Toxic spread around the opponent's team because of Crobat's ability to just taunt and prevent any recovery. So Toxic actually helps me quickly wear down their team. Next thing you need to make sure of is that you give Slowbro Regenerator, because it's quite frankly the single best abilities. Now we're going to focus on EVs. I'm going to give this guy 248 HP. There's really no specific reason why I'm holding back those last 4, but I really think 393 HP looks prettier than 394, so that's why. We're going to give this guy almost maximum defense, but we're going to hold back a little bit because, as I told you guys before, I like to give my Pokemon at least 200 in each defense if they're going to be defensive. It's supposed to be taking our physical, and we want to give this guy plus defense speed, opposing Slowbro and Snorlax, so that maybe if they're at really low health, you can kill them off before they can recover off in your face. If you guys play UU at all, you have seen over and over and over on the ladder, but there's a reason for that. It's because it's Donphan, and it's pretty goddamn good. Actually, no, it isn't. What makes Donphan so useful is its ability to both lay down Stealth Rock and rapid spin it away, which is really the main reason you're using Donphan. I would tell you guys that there are other spinners in the tier, which there are. There's Blastoise, which is pretty good now that Roserade's gone, and there's also Kabutops, which is, I think, the best offensive spinner in the metagame. But to be honest, Donphan just fits so easily into so many kinds of teams that there's almost no reason not to run it. If you can't beat him, you gotta join him. So for stab move, we're going to pick the pretty obvious, which is Earthquake. And it just hits things really hard. And for, not coverage, but as a general utility move, we're going to give it Knockoff. Yes, that are trying to block your Rapid Spin. The problem is then you take a big chunk of HP as recoil, which is never good for a tank Pokemon, but some people think it's worth it, including myself. But unfortunately, Sableye has been released from the Dream World, which means that people are starting to use Sableye more than they use Mismagius. Which means that you can just hit it with Earthquake instead of using the more risky Head Smash. There's also Toxic, which hits this guy's second most common. And finally, there's Knockoff, which is really just a general utility move. But I picked it because, as I said before, this team relies a lot on spreading residual damage through Toxic from Slowbro and Crobat. So knocking off their leftovers just helps the process of wearing their team down. As for EVs, I really went for the obvious here. I went for almost maximum HP. I left a little bit behind because I really want to win all the speed types versus other Donphan, so I gave it 8 speed. Because a lot of people just don't invest in speed at all, which is kind of stupid to me, because opposing Donphan are actually taking like 40% from Earthquake, which means that if they switch into you, expecting you to Stealth Rock, and you Earthquake them on the switch, you're going to kill them off without them being able to do anything except maybe hit you for 60% in total. But they won't have Stealth Rock, and you'll be able to Rapid Spin theirs away. I mean, and they might be able to spin yours away as well, but it's not that big of a deal because you can set them up again. Obviously, as any tank Pokemon, we're going to run leftovers on this guy. And lastly, we're going to give this guy max attack and an adamant natures to make Earthquake hit extremely hard. The last Pokemon on the team is choice Scarf user in the metagame, and that would be Heracross. As I said before, we're going to make this guy a choice Scarfer. And usually I would advocate running an Adamant Nature on this guy, but recently I started seeing a surge of Shell Smash Jolly Nature. So I would probably start using Jolly Natures if I was you guys. But hey, don't listen to me, I'm only Coco. As for moves, we're going to use Mega Horn and Close Combat, which are Heracross's 2 really strong and reliable stab moves. Well, Mega Horn isn't all that reliable because it misses 15% of the time, although it seems like it's a lot higher. But hey, whatever. We're going to give it a coverage move, and that's Stone Edge, because it hits flying types, which are the only type that resists both of Heracross's stab moves. And in its last move slot, you actually have the option of running a lot of things. You could run Toxic, you could run Sleep Talk, or you could run Pursuit, which is what I choose to run on this team. Toxic has its merits because a lot of Heracross's switch-ins tend to be very vulnerable to Toxic, which is not going to get beaten by Stone Edge, so don't even say it. Yeah. Sleep Talk is pretty useful because you can switch into Sleep Powders and fire off Guts boosted moves that Sleep Talk picks while you sleep, obviously. Finally, we're going to give this guy Guts because obviously that's the best ability. And we're going to give this guy maximum speed and maximum attack. and we're gonna stick the last 4 in defense. So yeah. Oh, and by the way, do not dare make Heracross female, because look at the sprite. Look at what happens to its horn when it becomes female. It becomes a fucking heart. Tell me that's not the gayest shit you have ever seen in your life. Anyway, so this guy is gonna be male. And before I forget, let me switch Donphan to a female, because little horns are much sexier than big horns. That was really gay. Anyways, yeah, guys, that's the team. I hope Eternal provides an importable to it in the description. And I hope you guys have fun using it, because it's a pretty good team. It might look a little standard, but there's a lot of things you can do to make it less standard, such as give Snorlax Seed Bomb in this move slot. And it's actually not as bad as you think, because Mismagius can't set up on you. You're still doing like 40% damage with Seed Bomb. Or more, actually. You might be doing like 50% damage. You become a perfect counter to Shell Smash Omastar. You're doing a lot more damage than you would be doing otherwise to Donphan and Bulky Waters, which really like to switch into you. But it doesn't. The only thing that resists it is like Steel types, which are pretty rare in UU. But yeah, it's pretty good. I like Crunch better just because I like to OHKO Mismagius that don't expect it. That they expect Whirlwind in that slot. You can also play around with Slowbro's moveset, make this like Calm Mind or something. And you can also change Crobat's move to U-turn, maybe make Shaman into a Subseeder, and play around with this Heracross moveset. Move slot, not moveset, and with this Donphan move slot. Well, anyways, that's all for now.